Bill Clinton was the 42nd President of the United States and has one of the most consequential long-term foreign policy failures of the post-Cold War era. The Clinton administration is remembered by many as a relatively peaceful period, as it was situated between the Cold War and the War on Terror eras. Additionally, things in the U.S. foreign policy-wise seemed perfectly fine in the short term. However, a lot of issues in 2024 can trace their roots to the Clinton administration's poor handling of foreign affairs in the 90s. Since the Cold War had ended, Bill Clinton took a major backseat in the international affairs world, but it was a major transition period for the rest of the world between the Cold War. Clinton decided to make his major foreign policy to be based on humanitarian interventions. Another aspect of the Clinton administration and the 1990s is the fact that the 90s were a very polarizing decade in U.S. politics. This was where Republicans and Democrats began to hate each other on virtually every policy that they did. On the other hand, the domestic American economy was generally very good, so nobody really cared much about what was going on in international affairs. The first humanitarian intervention of the post-Cold War era by the United States was in Somalia with Operation Restore Hope in December of 1992 during the H.W. Bush administration. Previously, in April of 1992, United Nations Operation Somalia 1, or UNISOM 1, was established as a peacekeeping force during the Somalian Civil War. UNISOM 1 was very ineffective and replaced by Unified Task Force, or UNITAF, in Operation Restore Hope, where the U.S. Marines and Special Forces were sent into Somalia and restored order. But after Clinton came into office, the Marines were withdrawn in 1993, and only the SF units remained as UNITAF transferred authority back to UNISOM 2, which resulted in the Black Hawk Down incident in Operation Gothic Serpent and global disillusionment with humanitarian interventions. Therefore, nobody wanted to intervene in the Rwandan genocide, and it took a while for the U.S. to intervene in the Yugoslav wars with NATO air operations. A major consequence, other than the tremendous loss of human life in these instances, was that Clinton's main policy towards humanitarian interventions was no longer deemed as credible by American adversaries and allies alike. Turning to Russia, the post-Cold War era within the Russian Federation was complete and utter chaos. During the 1993 Russian constitutional crisis, Clinton told Yeltsin to regain the parliament building by any means necessary, and Yeltsin declared presidential rule by decree until 1994 and violently seized the building with force, killing 147 and injuring another 437 people. This instance showed that Yeltsin was in charge and fully backed by Clinton pretty much no matter what, and no matter how bad things got in Russia. Yeltsin is also heavily responsible for completely squandering Russia's chance at democracy and prosperity in the 1990s with his complete economic mismanagement and allowing for the mafia and Russian oligarchs to run the country. But that'll be a later video. Back to Clinton and Russia, Yeltsin was in a pretty bad state for running for re-election in 1996, but Clinton stepped in to help fund his candidacy. The election also saw oligarchs and Russian mobsters fully fund Yeltsin as they had thrived under his first term at the expense of pretty much everyone else in Russia. The main point is that Clinton is supporting a terrible Russian president who partially relies on mafia money and definitely relies on Russian oligarchs to keep power. Yeltsin won the semi-fraudulent election, and because things were so bad in Russia, he resigned in 1999 and made Vladimir Putin his successor. So Clinton is partially responsible for Putin coming to power, and is responsible for Russian revisionism, as when Putin came into the presidency, he did everything that he could to be the exact opposite of Boris Yeltsin. Turning to Iraq, which has got to be the most significant abomination of the Clinton administration's foreign policy disasters. After the Gulf War, U.S. and UN sanctions on Iraq had been aimed at getting Saddam Hussein to comply with the UN, but when Clinton came into office, these sanctions had shifted from compliance to regime change. Saddam would constantly play games where he does not comply with the UN weapons inspections to try to make himself seem tough against Iran, and then the US launched a few cruise missiles, and then Saddam would finally back down and let the inspectors in. Growing tired of playing all of this cruise missiles games with Saddam Hussein, to weaken his grip on power, Clinton signed the Iraq Liberation Act into law on October 31, 1998, which now officially instituted a policy of regime change against Iraq, though it explicitly stated that it did not seek the use of American military forces. But how did Clinton expect the Iraqis to overthrow Saddam Hussein when sanctions kept the population starving, poor, and sectarianized? The sanctions enacted on Iraq by Clinton completely solidified Saddam Hussein's rule over the country and broke down pretty much all legitimate institutions in the country. Additionally, the sanctions made the conditions necessary so that when the 2003 invasion came, the whole country broke apart. UN food packages were taken up by the Saddam Hussein regime during the sanctions years, and the regime used them to hold populations of certain areas hostage with food, and then the food would be given in exchange for suspected anti-Saddam rebels. Crime and violence also became very common in Iraq in the 90s as people turned to the black market for food. Clinton's sanctions also caused the mass sectarianism within Iraq between Shia and Sunni groups, so that when the 2003 invasion came, the country had little to no institutions left and the people had violent ethnic tensions. But credit where credit is due regarding Clinton on Iraq, his cruise missile attacks on Iraq had forced Saddam into compliance without the need for ground troops, and he also maintained U.S. credibility. Clinton also launched Operation Vigilant Warrior, which deterred another Iraqi attack on Kuwait in 1994. He also maintained the no-fly zones over Iraq in Operations Northern and Southern Watch, as well as supported the Kurds in Operation Provide Comfort. However, he ended Operation Provide Comfort in 1996 at Turkey's request because the Turks wanted a better relationship with Saddam Hussein and Iran, who both had attacked the Kurds previously. This video was primarily about these three major foreign policy decisions by the Clinton administration that set the stage for some of the disastrous issues which have faced the world in the global war on terrorism and post-global war on terrorism eras. Clinton did have some pretty successful foreign policies, such as the NATO bombings in Yugoslavia to bring the Dayton Accords and Operation Uphold Democracy, which got Haitian dictator Raul Cedras to step down. There are other successes and other failures by the Clinton administration which had drastic impacts on the 2000s to the present day, but that would have to be in other videos. Do you like these types of videos where I discuss parts of a president's foreign policy and how it has impacted the present day? Write in the comments, and thank you for watching. Also, Bill Clinton had the chance to kill Osama bin Laden in the early 90s in Sudan, but rejected the plan to do so. Okay, now I'm done. Bye!